The dismissive avoidant struggles profoundly with emotional intimacy, but often maintains a robust and active relationship with physical desire. Lust is one of the few intense emotions they allow themselves to feel freely because it exists separate from the vulnerability that terrifies them. Sexual attraction does not require emotional disclosure, does not demand commitment, does not threaten their autonomy in the ways that love does. For the dismissive avoidant, lust becomes a primary motivator in relationships, sometimes the only motivator that can override their instinct to maintain distance. Understanding this pattern reveals why they can be intensely physically present while remaining emotionally absent, and why their interest often peaks around sexual availability rather than emotional connection. Physical desire bypasses emotional defenses. The dismissive avoidant has constructed elaborate defenses against emotional vulnerability, but these defenses do not extend to physical desire in the same way. Sexual attraction operates on a different circuit in their nervous system, one that does not trigger the same attachment fears that emotional intimacy does. They can feel intense lust for someone without it threatening their sense of independence or activating their core wound around abandonment. This creates a dynamic where the dismissive avoidant is highly motivated to pursue and maintain connections that satisfy their physical needs while remaining completely unavailable for emotional partnership. They can be passionately engaged in the bedroom while being cold and distant everywhere else. The compartmentalization is not hypocrisy, but rather the natural result of allowing themselves to access one form of intimacy while blocking all others. Lust is safe, love is dangerous, so they pursue the former with intensity while fleeing from the latter with equal force. Sexual novelty activates their desire more than relationship depth. The dismissive avoidant is particularly responsive to new sexual experiences and new partners. The excitement of novelty, the chase of seduction, the intensity of early physical attraction. These activate their interest in ways that long-term partnership cannot sustain. Once the sexual relationship becomes familiar and routine, once it exists within the context of emotional expectation and relationship commitment, the dismissive avoidance interest begins to wane. This is not because they have low sex drive, but because their desire is fueled by the dopamine of newness rather than the oxytocin of bonding. They are motivated by conquest, by the validation of being desired, by the physical intensity that does not require emotional depth. The moment sex becomes intertwined with feelings, with expectations of emotional reciprocity, with the assumption that physical intimacy should deepen emotional connection, the dismissive avoidant begins to withdraw. They can maintain high sexual interest only as long as it remains separated from genuine intimacy. They use lust to avoid emotional intimacy. For many dismissive avoidants, physical intimacy becomes a substitute for emotional connection and a tool to avoid it simultaneously. They can use sex to create the illusion of closeness without actually being vulnerable. After periods of emotional distance, they might initiate physical intimacy as a way to reconnect without having to discuss feelings, address issues, or engage in the emotional labor that genuine repair would require. Sex becomes the language they use when words about emotions feel impossible. This allows them to maintain some form of connection while never having to cross the threshold into real vulnerability. Their partner might interpret the physical intimacy as a sign of emotional reconnection. But for the dismissive avoidant, it is often a way to satisfy physical needs and provide just enough connection to keep the relationship viable without having to actually show up emotionally. The lust is real, but it exists in isolation from love, and they prefer it that way. Physical attraction provides power without vulnerability. The dismissive avoidant is highly motivated by lust, partly because it allows them to feel powerful and desirable without requiring them to be emotionally open. Being wanted physically provides ego gratification and validation that does not come with the vulnerability of being loved for who they are internally. Sexual desire is about their body, their physical appeal, their ability to create pleasure, all external attributes that feel safer than being valued for their emotional availability or inner self. They can be sexually confident while remaining emotionally insecure. They can pursue and be pursued in physical contexts while maintaining complete emotional unavailability. This dynamic allows them to experience intensity and passion without the terrifying exposure that emotional intimacy demands. The lust motivates them because it offers a version of connection they can control, where they can be desired without having to be truly known. Why this creates confusing relationship dynamics. Partners of dismissive avoidance often experience profound confusion around this pattern. The dismissive avoidant can be intensely physically affectionate, highly sexual, deeply engaged in physical intimacy, and this creates the illusion that they are capable of deep connection. But the moment conversation turns emotional, the moment vulnerability is required outside the bedroom, the dismissive avoidant shuts down completely. This creates a devastating dynamic where the partner feels connected during physical intimacy and then abandoned immediately afterward. The dismissive avoidance motivation by lust means they will show up for sex, but disappear for emotional support, will initiate physical closeness, but retreat from emotional disclosure, will maintain sexual consistency while being emotionally unreliable. Understanding this allows partners to stop interpreting physical desire as evidence of emotional investment and to recognize that for the dismissive avoidant, lust and love are not just separate, but often mutually exclusive experiences.